Welcome everyone to Mail Fuzz TV. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation Season 6 Episode 21. It's called Frame of Mind. So full spoilers for the episode, as always. So this is the character thinks they're actually in an asylum or a mental hospital, but they think everything they've done in the show up until this now has been in their head, been there in their imagination. So it's making them question reality. So there's some, you know, I've seen other shows do this type of episode, so I've definitely seen some of these tropes before. Although there's definitely some things that I expected to do that it didn't do, which I'm
I also
surprised
think
by.
this did it in probably a slightly different way to most of the other examples I can think of.
Yeah, the key thing that I felt was different is that I was expecting it to be set in present day Earth. I was expecting them to be like, I'm supposed to be on a starship, and then everyone go, there's no such thing as starships, William. You know, I was kind of expecting that.
Yeah, it doesn't do that. It's definitely a case of present day for this show. You know, it's very much, you know, the Federation, Starfleet are a thing. He's just not an officer.
Yeah, he's in a space station that's a psychiatric hospital. Effectively, which, you know, did kind of shake things up. It kind of kept me on my toes, sort of like, you know, there's some things about halfway through or so where it's like, oh, this feels like reality starting to really form, like we're starting to see stuff that's actually real, and then it kind of pulls that away again as well by the end. Yeah,
it's interesting because it starts on what seems like, well, the opening 30 seconds or so. It's like, oh, it's the delusion, because you remember the description from last time as the opening's happening, and then it turns out, oh, it's not the delusion. It's fine. This is just a play they're performing, and then it seems pretty normal for, I don't know, 5-10 minutes, and then everything kind of changes, and by maybe 2/3, obviously you know the asylum stuff isn't real because that's kind of what the point is, but you're not sure what is real at that point. You don't know what exactly has happened.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that when you get into it, the asylum stuff to an extent is real. And I say to an extent, because everything he actually sees and that we see technically isn't really happening. The actual events of the episode is him on a table the entire time, and everything's in his head. Everything we see up until the last, like, 2 minutes of the episode are all in his head. But he does seem to be in a facility that what he sees when he's seeing the asylum is probably accurate. Especially since everything that you see when he's on the starship, they're all based on recent memories. They really were doing a play just before he went on this mission. You know, he hears the mission being given to him early on in the episode, and that's because he remembers getting this mission. So I think parts of it you do piece together fairly accurately. You know, it's like, oh, he's gone down to try and rescue some people because they caught up in this war between these factions, and we've heard they're doing torturing and things like that because they want secrets, they want weapons, they want technology. So quite quickly you're like, well, it kind of feels like he's been captured by one of these groups and they are doing weird psychological stuff to him to try and unleash memories and secrets and whatever it may be. And that part is true. It's just that there's a little bit other, you know, layers to it as well as it's going.
Yeah, which I really appreciated, because when this episode started, I remembered what it was. I think my expectations were relatively low, not because I thought it would be bad, but because I thought I've seen this done quite a few times since, and I assumed, okay, I've seen future iterations on this idea that have probably developed it further, and this might feel fairly simplistic. And it's not at all. It's actually a lot deeper than I thought it was going to be in that regard. If anything, other versions have kind of just stripped it back and simplified it.
It kind of is and it isn't. Like, I'm off two minds. On the one hand, I think that it does do some different things with it, which is really nice. But at the same time, like, I almost felt it get predictable as well to an extent, where, like, by the time it feels like Data and Worf, the real Data and Worf, have come to rescue him, and it all makes too much sense. I'm like, this is too early. This is going to turn out to just be an illusion again. Like, it's all just going to be, you know, it literally shatters. He fires a phaser and it shatters, and it's like, okay, so that wasn't really it either. But at this point, I'm like, okay, it was a little bit too early to wrap it up. But at the same time, by the time they revealed it, I looked at the time again and went, there's not a lot of time left though to do a lot with whatever the resolution's going to be. Like, it kind of like put into this tight spot at the end, and I think it was perfectly fine, like how it wrapped up. But ultimately, it's just he gets up off the table. You know, he wakes up, he rejects all the illusions. He wakes up on the table, he fights back, grabs his communicator, and says, "Beam me out," and that's it. He gets beamed out, and there's a little bit of wrap up on the ship, but that's how the main conflict ends.
It's also probably, out of all the versions of this I've seen, the most definitive of no, none of that was real. Like all the other ones I've seen still play it as a, well, maybe. Yeah, even though the characters accept, they're like, no, it's fine. There's still always just that little, but what if? Whereas this doesn't play that at all. No,
instead he wants to tear down the set of the play because it's the cell that he was in the illusion, or delusion, I should say.
And it's a little bit therapeutic.
Yeah, although it did make me wonder. This is just it's not really a critique, but it did make me wonder for a second as he started ripping off the cheap, like set. I was like, you've got a holodeck. Why don't you just use a holodeck to do the set? why are we doing cheap?
I think the answer is because then they have to hold the plays in the holodeck.
Seems big enough for the crowd they had.
Okay, yes, but I don't know. I assume there's a charm to low rent theatre.
All right, I'm just
maybe that's part of it is doing it all yourself.
Which is not the first time it's come up, but it is kind of weird that one of Beverly's hobbies is just to put on plays and direct plays. It's such a weird, random, extra thing she does.
Like I say, I assume it's just part of the hobby. Is we're gonna do this as if we're an old drama club. We're gonna do it all ourselves.
And she forces the people around her to take part in it, even when they don't want to. Person. Yes, yeah. Riker really wants nothing to do with this, but he's getting into it anyway and doing it. And Picard's like, "Don't you dare pull out, because if you pull out, she'll come after me."
Yeah,
and I'm not having that. So it's that's all just sort of like the background stuff with the other characters. The big thing with the episode is that early on he starts seeing this like guy with this sort of interesting kind of head. He's got like it's almost, imagine like if someone said they've got, think Klingon wrinkle, but it's like two big fleshy eyebrows above
that's a good way
eyes.
of describing it.
Yeah, two big fleshy eyebrows that go down the side of the head.
Think like Neanderthal brow.
Yeah, I love that.
Klingon ridges.
Yeah, there you go. And it's like, okay, so he's like not really here, or he's the one that's behind the delusions, in the real world, it's something like that. That's kind of what you're thinking early on. But there's stuff like it becomes clear relatively early on that some of all of the stuff we've been seeing has all been fake, because Worf starts acting kind of weird in a scene where he cuts Riker by accident, but he also keeps getting annoyed at him, and it does kind of feel sudden. It feels like, okay, this is a clue, this is something to go on here, because he's acting weird. It's not just Riker starting to act, because he reacts to the guy's injured in the sick bay, and he's sort of freaking out a little bit. He talks to Troy, he talks to Beverly, gets his head scanned, all these things. When the episode really comes alive, though, I think is when we actually see him perform the play, and it happens twice. This is the interesting thing, is that it does it the first time where he's in the play, it goes down well, and at the end of the performance, it turns into a real cell, right, where there's no crowd anymore, and we go into kind of an extended series of scenes in the mental hospital with him kind of like not really wanting to believe it. He thinks he meets another person who claims to be a starship like officer, but then she whips out a spoon and starts talking to her spoon, which did make me laugh, I'm not gonna lie.
And he's like deluded enough that he's obviously in this institution, but is just aware enough that he's like, yeah, that's a spoon. I don't think that's doing anything.
Yeah, and he's told he killed someone, and that's how he ended up being brought in, and all the rest of it. But then he wakes up back on the starship, and they kind of treat it like that entire thing sort of plays to him like it was just a really bad dream, including the performance. So the performance has not happened yet, so he has to actually go do the performance now. But this time, instead of waiting to the end for it to just change, it starts kind of breaking down gradually throughout the performance, where he sees the wrinkly-headed guy, which, to be fair, everyone at this asylum has these rings. This is just obviously the species where this planet is. But he sees him behind the glass door. He sees the crowd. I think it's great the crowd start clapping at a really kind of like surreal moment where he's freaking out, and it's like,
yeah.
But at the same time, their expressions don't read like they're saying, "Oh, that's a great performance." They kind of read really bizarre, like, "Oh, they're all clapping at a really."
It's really surreal, and he's just there, like like, is this real? Is this the play? He's freezing at one point, and there's someone throwing in the line as if he's just forgotten it.
Yeah. And in actual fact, it's not that he's forgotten the line. He's having a mental breakdown is what's actually happening. Yeah. I think the one thing I'll say about this episode as well that I think is a positive is that I noticed just little flourishes in the direction. It was, because it kind of had to give a different feel. And there's really flashy moments, like when he's screaming outside the sort of glass window on the door, and there's like a quick track in of the camera as he's screaming. It kind of goes out of its way to try and give you the vibes of a psychiatric hospital, even though it looks like a futuristic spaceship set as it normally does.
And it has Frakes giving a fantastic performance.
Oh yeah, he's bouncing around all over the place.
He has a lot to do, a lot of different things that he has to showcase, and I think he excels in everything in it.
He has to obviously be himself, as in be Riker. He has to be Riker losing his mind and thinking it's all fake, but he also has to be Riker pretending to act like he's losing his mind, but he's not really losing his mind. But that has to be different from later when he's actually supposed to be losing his mind.
Yeah,
there's
a subtle differentiation, and he pulls it off.
Yeah, it's all very good. Simple thing in the set design that I thought was quite smart, because there's a couple of moments where like the turbo lift door opens and he sees the hallway of the asylum, right? That could very easily not be obvious that it's the asylum, but they did a really smart thing where they put a distinguishing characteristic in those hallways, which is they've all got these like yellow wedges sort of on the ceiling, and it's not much, you don't think about it much, but it's actually something just to let you know that it's clearly different. We're not on the Enterprise anymore. Even though we're used to what those hallways look like, it still had to be distinct, and it was just a really smart way of like being instantly, no, it's there.
Clever as well. Just obviously just the fact that there is something different is already clever in itself, but from the sheer design of it, using yellow, which is a very obvious color to your eye, it
stands out. Yeah,
it will always stick out, even to a casual observer. They'll notice yellow.
There's a reason why yellow is the color of most text and most YouTube thumbnails. I'll put that out there for everyone.
Hey, nature nailed it millennia ago with shit like bees and wasps.
You might do the odd bit of pink and the odd bit of light green, but it's mostly yellow. Yeah. Oh, it's the same in video games. Like, people could play the Resident Evil 4 remake came out recently, and everyone was complaining that all the boxes that are breakable have a bit of yellow on them. But it's like, the reason why they do that is because graphics are too good now that everything just blends together. Like, everything looks too, quote unquote realistic that you wouldn't know what you can interact with. So they have to like put a bit of yellow just to.
Oh, yellow paint on this is the walls you can climb.
Yeah, you get that in a lot of games. Because back in the day, when graphics were simpler, the interactable objects just stuck out because they looked different. They looked like they were glowing. They looked like they were like 3D objects on like a flat surface. But now you have to do that. So that's why yellow. It's such a simple little thing. But just these yellow wedges on the ceiling just make it stick out as being surreal and kind of different.
Yeah, and it works. Something that I wish they'd done more with is earlier on they kind of present the idea of, is the idea that he's performing this, playing it, and so into character, kind of making him lose his mind?
Oh, yeah.
Is he getting a bit lost in it? That's kind of what they present early on. I feel like they could have done a little bit more with that before it gets to the asylum, and before it kind of reveals that no, he's just kind of being tortured.
Yeah,
because they could have played him more. Is the play itself affecting him? Is he just broken?
Yeah, when he first sees a couple of things that he thinks weird, he goes to Troy for advice. He's in 10 forward, and she says, maybe you're just accessing feelings that you're not used to accessing, so you're not comfortable and you're reacting to them, and they kind of go down that path. I think it would be tough to do in a way, because I think there's so much that we have to kind of like get from, as the audience. I think there's so much we have to kind of understand about what this place is and what they're doing to him, that I think it's almost a separate episode to just suggest for most of it that he's just getting too much into this acting role.
Yeah.
But there are some interesting moments, where, and maybe this is kind of like a meta thing because they are literally actors in a TV show, but something like he's doing his eye makeup when he's talking to Beverly, and his hair's all disheveled. Actually, this is not a critique per se, but it's something that really bugged me. It's I don't know how long it was there for, but it was definitely when he was in the canteen of the asylum the first time, talking to the woman and then the guy. He for some reason, I don't know if this is so random and weird to be intentional, but I've done this before myself. But whoever's trimmed Frakes' beard, there was just one single long hair in the middle of his chin that wasn't trimmed like the rest of his beard. And maybe it's the sort of thing that before the HD era, before everything was remastered, maybe you could never notice this. But all I could see in this scene was a single long hair sticking out from his chin.
It's very possible it was a mistake. I think if you want to try and talk into what is the intentional choice for that, I think it's just maybe trying to show that there's some time past. He's disheveled a little bit, but they've tried to clean him up.
His hair's all, like all over the place intentionally so. But this just felt like such a weird, random little thing that it's like, this doesn't feel intentional. This feels...
just someone missed a hair.
Someone missed a hair that day. Yeah. But it really stuck out. Weird little thing. I guess the other thing that might have been interesting for him to go more into is... So once he sort of broke down again and he's went back to the asylum and he's kind of believing the doctor and stuff, he's like, yeah, okay, that's all delusion, this is real, let's give me the treatment or whatever. They do a thing where they kind of have him like project out the other characters and they all represent a part of him. So the idea being that his feelings are represented by Troy because she's the empath and the counselor and so on and so on. And I thought maybe there was more we could have done with that and like what each of those characters mean to him or represent in him. I thought that was something they could have played with a bit more. Like it's just one scene and it moves on. Like it's not.
It is because it gets pretty quickly in that scene. The alien kind of shows up.
Yeah,
and he's like, "Who's that?" I recognize him, but I don't know who he is.
Yeah. So yeah, it's funny. I think it's a good episode and I really enjoyed watching it. And I think it's it's relatively high rated for good reason. But there are a lot of things in here that feels like there's a lot of good ideas that they could have fleshed out.
Yeah, I could have seen this. Maybe you do it as a two-parter and you really flesh out some of those other concepts.
Yeah.
But and I think there'd be something ballsy about leaving it as a two-parter and kind of leaving it as is he delusional or not? Kind of, for a week.
Yeah, also, they mention, now admittedly, we don't know how accurate the information is he gets early on because he's still technically in a delusion, but we understand, everything else seems to be accurate and it's taken from his memories, so I have to assume it's accurate, and that is that Riker was sent down because there was like a medical team that was sort of left stranded, or a research team was left stranded during this conflict, and that's why he's going down in the first place. I couldn't help but feel at the end when he beams himself out of danger, that no one was talking about like the people he was supposed to be going down to save. Like, are they just assuming they're dead? Or...
I think so. Yeah, I think the assumption is mission failed.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I wish they'd well done that a bit more. I wish they actually had a oh shit, this failed. It's great that we got you back. It's almost got a relief sense at the end because we got Riker back and he was in trouble, and that's true. But it would have, he was there for a mission. It'd have been nice to kind of like, oh, but this does mean that we failed and this group of people died.
I'm almost surprised it didn't kind of have that feeling because I don't think Next Gen's been afraid to project that idea so often.
Not at all. They've definitely failed before and they've felt the impact of it. Yeah. But it definitely occurred to me when we got to the end of the story. So, and I realized he was going to take down the set at the end because that's what he was clearly talking about. But I was like, okay, is this going to be like Tommy Wiseau wrecking the room? Like how like unhinged are you going to go here as you're wrecking this room? And he just kind of pulls off one panel and it cuts to the credits.
Yeah. Hey, these sets are expensive. Let's not go crazy.
I almost wanted them to go to a replicator and like get a sledgehammer and just like, all right, this is.
You don't want to see the whole wall wobble.
This is catharsis. This might be a fake wall though. It's allowed to wobble.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. This isn't some original series episode where the wall actually wobbles and it's not meant to.
Yeah.
So, yeah. No, a pretty solid episode, pretty interesting. Obviously, it's a concept that we've seen used in other shows, and I think this had enough of its own spin to it. It didn't just feel like, even though this maybe came first before all the other ones I've seen, it didn't just feel the exact same, so I wasn't too
I was pleasantly surprised that it wasn't just those, but like a simple take on it. I mean, I guess you could argue the fact that we were expecting it to be is the show real at all? That presumably came later now. That I'm thinking that this isn't and that is a deeper level in itself. But because we're so used to that version on it, this almost feels different and deeper.
Well, yeah,
because doing that.
one of the things that it usually goes into is, and I'm thinking of the Buffy one more than anything here, which obviously has the, hey, I kill vampires. There's no such thing as vampires, Buffy. You're crazy. Like, so obviously you've got that element that I brought up earlier, but the other part of it is this, like, you've made yourself a superhero. Like, in your fantasy, you're this badass who kills vampires. Like, you've given yourself this, like, delusion of grandeur, that you're important, that you're special, right? And there's a lot of thematic, you know, things that go along with that, like what you're suggesting about the character and like exploring their psyche. So like I was kind of expecting, like, you know, William, you've imagined yourself to be like this high-ranking Starfleet officer who's good with the ladies and you're very suave, and you know,
there could have been a really interesting look of, you always consider yourself, you know, first officer, but you don't even in your fantasies you don't put yourself as captain.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, they could have done something with that.
Definitely a take you could have done with on that.
Yeah, like maybe you like eliminate yourself, or you've got some issues that you need to get over.
Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of things that they could do with it, but what they do is pretty solid. You know, some caveats, but
yeah, like I said, I think there's definitely some things that could have been developed in different ways. Some things that definitely could have been hidden from the audience a little bit better early on. Maybe not just telegraphed as they were, but overall, I think it's pretty good, and I've not got that much to complain about.
Yeah. So we'll be doing Deep Space Nine next time, but I will tell you what's coming up on Next Generation right now. So it's called Suspicions, and here's the description on IMDb. Dr. Crusher puts her career on the line to prove a scientist's theoretical new shielding technology which may have cost him his life.
Okay. It's pretty simple. You know, not too much to go on in terms of what.
Do you know? No, I'll give it this. I like that it seems to be heavily focused on Beverly, but it is not a romantic story. I think that is a win right away.
Not a romantic story that we know of.
True. I mean, maybe she'll have a love interest that we're not ready for, but
yeah.
But you know, I like that it's more about her like caring about, I don't know, her ethics or her, you know, her belief in science or whatever. You know. Yeah. That sounds more interesting to me than anything else. So that's good. All right, so that'll be next time on Next Gen, but we will be back with Deep Space Nine on our next Trek review. So look forward to that. You can, of course, let us know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. You can also support all the content and help keep it all coming by going to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and supporting us over there. Or you can use the one-time super thanks button on YouTube if that's more your thing. Any and all help is appreciated, but that is the show. So thank you once again for watching and listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Star Trek, and somewhere out there, Wesley Crusher imagined that he was on a starship, when in reality, he's just, I don't know, where's a pathetic place for young Wesley Crusher to be instead?
I don't know, school.
He's in school. He's stuffed in a locker with a wedgie.